So I was looking at this unit, the Dragon Princes, one of the most expensive cavalry in the game and the heaviest shock cav of the High Elf roster. And I was thinking, they start with some physical resistance, but how much further can I buff them? And this build right here is the answer. For the army builds, we have a whole line of rangers providing a lot of anti-infantry power to clean up the unarmored Wood Elf infantry. In the front, we have a bunch of Shadow Warriors and Alarialle Reaver archers to counteract the Wood Elf skirmishing capabilities. Now in the back, we have the core of this army, the Dragon Princes riding alongside a Handmaiden of the Everqueen and Alarialle the Radiant. Now Alarialle is a perfect buffing character, providing a lot of resistance to units around her, but in the form of Shield of Safri, 10% damage resistance every time she casts a spell, and Shield Stone of Isha, an additional 10% physical resistance to units around her. Now combined with Shield of Thorns, she can provide up to 40% physical resistance to units around her. Combined with the innate 20% physical resistance of the Dragon Princes, you're gonna hit 60% damage resistance against physical damage. And with the massive healing power Alarialle can bring to the table, the buffed up Dragon Princess will be practically invulnerable for a short amount of time. During that short Super Saiyan time, they can tank the heaviest hitters even with heavy AP. Now for the Wood Elf army build, we have a whole line of Eternal Guards as the front line, backing up some Way Watchers. On the flank, we have some Stag Knights over here, more Stag Knights on the other flank, and at the back, some anti-large armor-piercing Enigmas of Gairen, the regiment of renowned Zotes. Now in the sky, we also have a Spellweaver of high magic flying around, bringing in Apotheosis and Soul Quench. So that's basically it for army builds. Let's get the battle started and see how it goes. Now for a bit of context for this battle, I was playing on the Antiquity ladder against the player Resume, a Russian content creator and very good at this game with much better micro skill than me. So I was basically relying on the auto skirmish mode as well as the physical resistance spam to even the odds. My units are just pushing forward, showering his units with a lot of missile fire from the Alarialle Reaver archers as well as the Shadow Warriors. Shadow Warriors trading extremely cost effectively if they can get their hands on some Way Watchers, as the scatter formation means that the armor piercing fire of these Way Watchers will be doing minimal damage, while the Shadow Warriors will do maximum damage due to the low armor of the Way Watchers. And since I do have the skirmishing advantage here, weird to say that when you're facing off against Wood Elves, I was not really in a hurry to go into melee combat, just using the Shadow Warriors to shower my opponents with some missile damage, getting some nice damage on the lightly armored Wood Elves. Stag Knights and the Zotes are just floating around trying to look for an opportunity for engagement, but with the Dragon Princes hanging around so close and also all these missile fire around, they are just pulling back, waiting for a better engagement, while the Stag Knights here are pushing forward, scaring away some of my rangers while turning around and go for a rear charge. But very nice micro from my opponent there, pulling back the Great Stag Knights in the last second possible, dodging that volley of arrow fire, no doubt trying to conserve the HP on these unarmored Stag Knights for later engagements. Nice unit conservation right there. Though the skirmish fight is getting a little less favorable for the Wood Elves, as the Way Watchers are floating too close to the front into the range of the Shadow Warriors, while their own missiles are shooting at the wrong target, as the Rangers are relatively cheap, having low armor, physical resistance, and also a scattered formation. Each shot from the Way Watchers would be earning very limited value. Now with their anti-infantry weapon strength, Rangers cleaving their way through Eternal Guards for the backline of the Wood Elves, while on the other hand, the Great Stag Knights punching through the defenses of the High Elves, getting into the Shadow Warriors. The massive charge damage will be doing quite a number on these squishy skirmishers, but the Dragon Princes counter-charging, also doing a lot of damage, especially with the magic damage imbued by Alarialle the Radiant. The physical resistance on the Great Stag Knights are all for naught. Combined with their massive charge bonus, they're doing significant damage to the unarmored Great Stag Knights. But my opponent is definitely prepared for this pitched engagement. More Stag Knights flooding in, also the Enigmas of Gairen as well, piling on top of each other in this kind of love fight. Even the Spellweaver have plunged into combat. Also, the Zotes have a timely cast of Flesh to Stone and Regrowth on the Great Stag Knights, allowing them to mitigate a lot of damage from my Dragon Princes, who have been taking massive damage from the armor-piercing damage and the magic damage from the Zotes. But to save these Dragon Princes, we have a Star of Avalon dropped together with a Shield of Thorns. Their physical resistance is now up to 50%, together with a Shield of Safri that worn off not long ago. They had a maximum 60% reduction of damage from the Great Stag Knights. Of course, that won't help them much against the Zotes who deal magic damage, but they are right now a solid anchor in the middle, holding back a huge tide of armor-piercing entities. And despite all that, holding themselves rather okay and allowing themselves to dish out decent damage against the Great Stag Knights, who are now falling left, right, and center under the crossfire from the Shadow Warriors, who are sitting back right in skirmish mode, dragging themselves away from the fight while shooting down all these approaching units. Of course, the Dragon Princes, after taking so much damage, will not be able to hold too well, so they are routing. But since the Wood Elf mobility is rather occupied, they will not be chased away and will be returning from routing soon enough. In the back of the Wood Elf lines, we have some Lone Rangers there, pushing themselves all the way into enemy lines. Fighting against some beleaguered Eternal Gods, they should be able to clean up swiftly and start pushing for the Way Watchers again. Back to the middle, the sacrifice of the Dragon Princes are not in vain. Now, with the help of all these Rangers, Handmaiden and Alarialle were able to break off all this pocket of armor-piercing troops, leaving the Spellweaver rather isolated in this blob, getting hunted down by the Handmaiden as well as the Alarialle the Radiant, forcing her to dart back into disguise. Also, with the crossfire from the Shadow Warriors doing some pretty hefty damage against the Spellweaver, so she is retreating and now healing herself up with Apotheosis, but an overcast Tempest dropped down right on top of her, slowing her down, rendering her vulnerable to all this missile fire, as my Rangers are pushing forward to block off all these Eternal Gods, while the Shadow Warriors will be slowly pulling back to safety. The Great Stag Knights trying desperately to hunt down all these Shadow Warriors, but being some slippery devils as they are just darting backwards, while the rest of the Shadow Warriors are crossfiring, stripping away what little remains of the Stag Knights' hit points. Now on the left, the final cavalry engagement begins. Stag Knights charging some Dragon Princes. With another cast of Shield of Thorns, our Dragon Princes are now yet again up to 60% of physical resistance. Despite the Stag Knights getting the charge and should be able to get a massive charge bonus, the fact that they do physical armor-piercing damage means that most of that damage output is cut by all that damage resistance buff. While the massive charge bonus and decent melee stats on the Dragon Princes combined with the cover fire from all the Shadow Warriors will be cutting through the whole Stag Knight unit like hot knife through butter. And to top that off, they have magic damage on their attacks, which ignores the physical resistance of Great Stag Knight due to Alarialle's ability. In retaliation, the Spellweaver dropped a perfect Soul Quench onto Alarialle, cutting away a huge chunk of her HP. Alarialle has to pull back, while the Dragon Princes will be sacrificed, charging themselves into the Enigmas, protecting Alarialle's retreat at the cost of their own lives, also buying time for the Shadow Warriors to fire into the fray to chip away the health of the remaining Zotes who are rather battered up with low HP remaining. Now for an overall view of the battlefield, the Rangers here, some of them are still very healthy. Over here, some over-chasing Rangers are pulling back. I basically have secured my main formation as my Shadow Warriors are still running and kicking, firing at whatever unit they can see. And Eternal Gods won't be able to finish off much of my units. The Rangers will easily catch up with them and will clean them up with that anti-infantry attack. Eternal Gods are no match for these dual sword infantry. Spellweaver, still trying desperately to snipe out Alarialle the Radiant, but unable to get too close to the fray due to all these Shadow Warriors, will be poking Alarialle with Soul Quenches. This is not exactly enough. Alarialle does have Earthblood to heal herself up even after some HP losses, also healing up the Shadow Warriors as well. The Wood Elves are really running out of steam right now. Way Watchers now ran out of ammo, will have to engage in melee, but there's only so much they can do, while the Zotes pushing forward trying to get the last hit on some Shadow Warriors, but getting shot in the face now with the Handmaiden as well as Alarialle charging forward, going into melee, trying to pin these guys down. They are unable to make an effective push against the slippery skirmishers. The last of the Stag Knights are getting dragged down. A Star of Avalon dropped in, healing up Alarialle and the Handmaiden, pulling back the balance of power, pushing the balance of power of the Wood Elves into army losses, and the Tree Huggers will be repelled back into the forest once more. Now let's have a quick look at the army performances for the spotlight of today's video. The Dragon Princes doing pretty decent value, recovering their own cost, 1,491 value. It's pretty good considering that they were heavily focused by all that AP damage from the Stag Knights, the Enigmas, and even some Way Watchers. Despite the heavy damage they took, they were able to hold themselves pretty decently due to the physical resistance buffs from Alarialle, and in the end even winning a cavalry charge against the Great Stag Knights who actually outnumbered them, really showcasing the power of the physical resistance buffs provided by Alarialle the Radiant. for the rest of the units, Rangers cutting their way through all this Eternal Guard, hacking and slashing into the backlines of the Wood Elves, trying to push away the Weight Watchers, and did a pretty good job at that too. Overall, pretty decent value from all these units. Shadow Warriors pretty much the MVP of this game, as they were kiting away all of these Wood Elf units. All the great Stag Knights got dragged down in the crossfire by all the Shadow Warriors, and in the end just basically provided a lot of missile damage fire against a lot of the unarmored Wood Elf units. Even the Enigmas got hit pretty hard by the crossfire, and Spellweaver getting focused down as she was dragged down in the blob fight earlier. Handmaiden got some pretty nice damage dealt against the Great Stag Knights and the Enigmas of Gyrin, but that's basically it. Alarialle the Radiant wasn't exactly the damage dealer, mostly there for healing and support only. Alarian Reaver Archers there, mostly there for kiting. One of them got into melee against some of the Weight Watchers but got shot back and pushed away, while the other one was able to do some nice skirmish fire in the end to just basically focusing down all these mobility of the Wood Elves. As for the Wood Elves, the Eternal Guards got perfectly countered by the Rangers, so not much to say about them. Weight Watchers, as always, a solid unit doing some really nice damage, but just not enough to carry the game. The Great Stag Knights there, one of them got focused down pretty hard, the other almost earned back their value, but still with all that damage mitigation from the High Elves, their damage output was severely limited, and being counterpunched by the magic imbued attacks of the Dragon Princes, they were unable to hold themselves for too long in combat due to their rather glass cannon status. Enigmas got some nice damage done, but only 1000 damage value. In the current meta, which will probably last till the end of Total War Warhammer 2, Zodes are a rather weak unit. Still, the anti-large magic damage means that they were able to cut through the physical resistance of my Dragon Princes, and in the end, they were able to do some decent work, though not anything astounding. Now for the characters of the Wood Elves, Spellweaver got some really good snipes with the Soul Quench on Alarialle, but unable to output any damage in melee, so she got dragged down in the end, especially with a critical break of all the Zodes and Stag Knights. She was surrounded and focused down by the crossfire from the Shadow Warriors, as well as a Tempest from Alarialle. The Waystalker wasn't able to do too much damage due to the lack of good targets, doing some okay damage but nothing too special. Now with the army performances out of the way, let's look into this army build of physical resistant Dragon Princes with a little bit more detail. Now one thing of note about Dragon Princes is that they do primarily non-armor piercing weapon damage. So if you put a Shield of Thorns on them, it will also buff up their massive weapon strength as well. Over here we can see that the Dragon Princes, the Fireborn, with their flaming damage was able to pummel all these butchers of Kalkengard. These regiment of renowned Minotaurs with their regeneration will be taking massive damage from the flaming attacks. Now that the Fireborn has dispatched the butchers, they are plunging back into melee against all these beastmen units, hammering the blob with a devastating rear charge. Now normally if they get piled upon by all these numerous troops, they will just get dragged down pretty quick, but we're now dumping an overcast Shield of Thorns on them, buffing their weapon strength all the way up to 56. And now their physical resistance up to 50, they are just tanking it out and dishing massive damage in return against all these puny beastmen units. They're surrounded, outnumbered, but they are not faltering. Their impressive melee stats plus the buff from the Shield of Thorns providing that massive weapon strength means that they're mowing through all these beastmen units. Not only are they tanky as hell, but also got turned into a killing machine with the right conditions. Just look at their damage value taking up rapidly. This physical resistance buff spamming isn't merely a defensive tactic, but also consists of an offensive side. Of course, we can't talk about an army build without talking about its weaknesses. This physical resistance buff is not everlasting. Once it wears off, your Dragon Princes will get vulnerable to all kinds of AP attacks. So armor-piercing missiles that can target your Dragon Princes before you can go into melee and activate the buffs is a perfect counter. Say, throwing axes, cannonballs, handguns, they all will make short work of your Dragon Princes. Another issue that they faces is magic damage. Like right now, the Dragon Princes are subjected to Traitorkin, an effective killing spell against any cavalry units, ignoring all that physical resistance from Alarialle, stripping away their HP directly. Also, they have to beware of single entities capable of dealing massive AP damage in the hundreds. Right now the Fireborn is also stuck against 3 Tuskgor chariots, all of them capable of cutting down a unit model in a couple strikes, even after all that damage reduction. And now even the Sons of Goros, who have magic armor piercing attacks, are joining the fight. The combination of magic damage and massive armor piercing from the characters are basically way too much for the Fireborn to handle. Not even the combination of Shield of Thorns and Star of Avalon can keep them alive. So you need to always be aware of magic damage and always keep your Fireborn on the move, especially when the Shield of Thorns are off. That is when your Dragon Princes are basically normal Dragon Princes, very vulnerable to any armor piercing attacks, and if they're stuck against armor piercing infantry or cavalry, then they're as good as dead. Overall, I wouldn't say this is the most competitive build, as it does have a lot of weaknesses to exploit, and it really relies on that short window of invulnerability for your Dragon Princes to do a lot of damage. But it is just really fun to see these elite cavalry of the High Elves turning into absolute killing machines, holding like a chat despite being surrounded and outnumbered, all thanks to Alarialle's buffs, while dishing out maximum damage in return. And yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to get notified every time I upload a new video. They will be covering topics ranging from general battle replays, wild army builds like this one, or general tips and strategies for online multiplayer for Total War Warhammer 2. And if you have any replays that you want to showcase, feel free to drop by my Discord or send me an email with the replay file attached. I'll be sure to check it out. That is going to be all, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.